I'm Verna, a 63-year-old retired accountant from Boston. Throughout my life, I've prided myself on financial responsibility, building a secure retirement after my husband passed. My relationship with my son Jeffrey was always close until he married Allison 5 years ago. Looking back, I should have seen the signs earlier, but a mother's love can sometimes cloud judgment. When they asked for $155,000 for a business venture, my refusal set off a chain of events I never could have imagined. Before I start my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever had someone try to trick you out of money. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this kind of real-life drama interests you. My husband Richard and I had a wonderful 35 years together before cancer took him from me 15 years ago. He was always meticulous about our finances, ensuring I would be comfortable if anything happened to him. Between his life insurance, our savings, and my own career as an accountant, I've been fortunate enough to live comfortably in retirement without financial worries. Jeffrey is our only child. I won't pretend we didn't spoil him somewhat, the hazard of having just one. But Richard always made sure to instill good values in him, emphasizing hard work and responsibility. Jeffrey was a bright boy who grew into a capable young man. After graduating with a marketing degree, he landed a decent position at a digital marketing agency in Boston. His career seemed promising, and I was proud of the path he was forging. About 5 years ago, Jeffrey met Allison at a networking event for young professionals. He called me the very next day, unusually excited about this amazing woman he'd just met. When he brought her to Sunday dinner a week later, I could see why he was smitten. Allison was undeniably beautiful, tall blonde with a dazzling smile and impeccable style. She was charming and engaging, asking thoughtful questions about my life and complimenting my home. Yet something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was a calculation behind her smile that made me uneasy. I dismissed it as the natural wariness of a mother, seeing her son falling hard for someone new. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, Jeffrey announced they were engaged. When I suggested they might want to date longer before making such a commitment, he brushed off my concerns. "When you know, Mom," he said, with the certainty of someone deeply in love. They married in an extravagant ceremony that cost far more than I thought prudent for two young professionals just starting out. After the wedding, I began noticing subtle changes in Jeffrey. Our weekly phone calls became less frequent. He would cancel our monthly dinners at the last minute always, with an excuse related to Allison. She wasn't feeling well, or they had been invited to an important event. When we did get together, he seemed different, more reserved, less likely to share details about his life. Allison's controlling nature became increasingly apparent. She would answer questions directed at Jeffrey, interrupt him mid-sentence, or give him pointed looks that would immediately silence him. Once, when he mentioned wanting to take a vacation to visit his college roommate in California, she laughed and said, "That's not happening this year," in a tone that left no room for discussion. The look of resignation on my son's face broke my heart. Their lifestyle was another red flag. Despite their modest incomes, they lived in an upscale apartment, drove luxury cars, and took expensive vacations. Jeffrey would casually mention weekend trips to New York or Chicago, dining at restaurants where entrees cost more than I would spend on an entire meal for two. When I gently inquired about their finances, Jeffrey would become evasive, changing the subject or assuring me everything was under control. My relationship with Allison grew increasingly strained. Though she maintained a facade of politeness, there was an undercurrent of tension whenever we were together. She seemed to view me as competition for Jeffrey's attention and affection, rather than as family. I tried to build a bridge, inviting her to lunch, asking about her interests, offering to teach her family recipes that Jeffrey loved, but she kept me at arm's length with practiced pleasantries. I also noticed her relationship with her own family was complicated. Her mother Diane seemed to walk on eggshells around her. During one holiday gathering, I overheard Diane asking Allison if she'd received her birthday card. Allison replied sharply, "Yes, Mom, I got your $50 check. Really generous." The sarcasm in her voice made Diane wince, and I felt a surge of sympathy for the woman. Over the years, Jeffrey had occasionally asked me for loans, 3,000 for car repairs, 5,000 when they were between apartments. I always obliged, though I noticed the money was never repaid despite initial promises. When I mentioned it once, Jeffrey looked embarrassed and said, "Things are a little tight right now, Mom. Allison has some medical bills." Yet a week later, Allison posted pictures of her new designer handbag on social media. My philosophy on money has always been conservative. I believe in saving for emergencies, living within your means, and investing wisely for the future. Richard and I never carried credit card debt, and we planned carefully for retirement. I tried to instill these values in Jeffrey, and for a while I thought they had taken root. But Allison seemed to operate under different principles, spending freely, focusing on appearances, using tomorrow's money for today's desires. Last Thanksgiving highlighted the growing issues in our relationship. I hosted dinner at my home, as I had every year since Richard passed. Allison spent most of the evening on her phone, barely participating in conversations. When she did engage, it was to talk about the Black Friday sales she planned to hit at midnight. Jeffrey seemed tense throughout the meal, drinking more wine than usual and jumping whenever Allison addressed him. After dinner, I found Jeffrey alone in the kitchen, staring out the window. When I asked if everything was okay, he started to say something, then stopped as Allison appeared in the doorway. "We need to get going," she announced. "I want to get in line at Nordstrom." They left with barely a goodbye, Allison practically pulling Jeffrey out the door. As I watched them drive away, I felt a deep sense of foreboding. Something was very wrong in my son's life, and I feared it would only get worse. The Sunday afternoon visit caught me by surprise. Jeffrey rarely came by unannounced, especially with Allison in tow. Yet there they were on my doorstep, all smiles, Jeffrey holding an expensive bottle of wine that I recognized as costing well beyond what he would typically spend. "We thought we'd surprise you, Mom," Jeffrey said, his voice carrying an unusual edge of nervousness. He avoided direct eye contact, which had always been his tell since childhood, when he was uncomfortable about something. Allison, by contrast, exuded confidence. She wore a designer outfit I'd seen in a magazine the previous week, priced at more than my monthly expenses. "We have something exciting to discuss with you," she gushed, pushing past me into the living room as though she owned the place. Over the next hour, they laid out their proposal. They wanted to create what Allison described as a revolutionary wellness platform, a combination of an app and subscription service that would connect users with wellness providers, specialty products, and personalized health plans. "The market is absolutely exploding right now," Allison explained, her hands moving animatedly. "Everyone is focused on wellness and self-care. Our platform will be a one-stop solution that brings everything together." I noticed that throughout the presentation, it was Allison doing most of the talking. Jeffrey occasionally nodded or added a brief comment, but he seemed more like a spectator than an equal partner in this venture. His marketing background should have made him the natural spokesperson. Yet, he remained mostly silent. When they finally reached the purpose of their visit, Allison leaned forward. "We need seed capital of $155,000 to get this off the ground. We've already spoken with developers and marketing consultants. With your investment, we could launch within 3 months." The amount stunned me. It represented a significant portion of my retirement savings. Allison must have seen the shock on my face, because she quickly added, "It's not just a loan, Verna. You'd be part of the business family. We're projecting profits of 7 figures within the first 18 months. As a career accountant, several red flags immediately caught my attention. Their business plan was vague on specifics, but grandiose in projections. They couldn't clearly explain their competitive advantage in an already saturated market. The revenue model seemed unrealistic, and their projected expenses were suspiciously low. Most concerning was the specific amount they requested $155,000, which made me wonder if they had existing debts they weren't disclosing. When I asked about their market research, Allison handed me a few glossy printouts with colorful graphs but little substantive data. When I inquired about their contingency plans, if the business didn't meet projections, she dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand. The beauty of this business model is its guaranteed success. Everyone cares about wellness now, she assured me. This isn't just a trend, it's a complete lifestyle shift in the market. Jeffrey remained conspicuously quiet during my questions, fidgeting with his wedding ring and occasionally taking long sips from his wine glass. I told them I would need time to think about it and review their materials more carefully. A reasonable request for such a large investment. Allison's smile tightened slightly, but she nodded. Of course, but we do need to move quickly. We have developers ready to start and we don't want to lose them. After Allison stepped outside to take a phone call, I had a moment alone with Jeffrey. Is everything okay, honey? I asked gently. This seems like a big step. His eyes darted nervously to the window, where we could see Allison pacing on the front lawn. We really need this, Mom, he said quietly. Things have been tight financially. This business could turn everything around for us. When I pressed him about their current financial situation, he reluctantly admitted they had accumulated significant debt, credit cards, personal loans, and a home equity line of credit on their underwater mortgage. The wellness business wasn't just an opportunity. It was a desperation move to solve their financial problems. After they left, I spent the evening researching similar wellness platforms. The market was indeed crowded with several well-established competitors, backed by significant venture capital. I also discovered numerous failed startups in the same space, many with business models nearly identical to what Jeffrey and Allison had proposed. More troubling, when I ran some basic calculations using their own projections, the numbers simply didn't add up. Their anticipated user acquisition costs were wildly underestimated, and their revenue projections assumed conversion rates that defied industry standards. The next morning, I called Jeffrey to deliver my decision. I explained my concerns as gently as possible, offering instead to help them with financial planning or debt consolidation if they were in trouble. Jeffrey began to respond, sounding relieved in a way that surprised me, when Allison's voice suddenly came on the line. She must have been listening on another extension. I'm disappointed you don't believe in your son's vision, she said coldly. This could have been a chance for you to be part of something special, but I guess you'd rather hold on to your money than support your family. This isn't about not supporting family, I tried to explain. It's about making a sound financial decision. I don't think... We get it, Allison interrupted. Your answer is no. We'll remember that. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat with the phone in my hand, a knot forming in my stomach. The conversation had confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't about a business opportunity, it was about access to my money. And Allison's parting words felt unsettlingly like a threat. The week following my refusal was eerily quiet. No calls from Jeffrey, no texts, not even the occasional social media interaction where he would normally like or comment on my posts. The silence felt deliberate, punitive. I tried calling twice, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I left cheerful messages asking how they were doing, making no mention of the business proposal or money, but received no response. Then surprisingly, I received a call from Diane, Allison's mother. We weren't close, our relationship was cordial at family gatherings, but never extended beyond that. Her call caught me off guard. I hope I'm not overstepping, she began hesitantly. But I wanted to let you know that Allison is organizing a family dinner this weekend. She specifically mentioned wanting you there. I thought it was strange she hadn't told you directly. During our conversation, Diane gradually revealed concerns about her daughter's spending habits. Allison has always been acquisitive, she said carefully. Even as a child, she needed to have the best of everything. But lately, it seems worse. Jeffrey bought her a beautiful necklace for their anniversary last month, and she returned it because it wasn't from Tiffany. Diane paused, then added reluctantly, "This isn't the first time Allison has tried to secure funds from family members. My brother, Allison's uncle Harold, gave her $50,000 3 years ago for what she described as a foolproof investment opportunity. He never saw a penny of it back, and when he asked about it, Allison told him the market had changed unexpectedly. Harold later discovered there had never been any investment." This information chilled me. It confirmed my suspicions about Allison's character, but also raised my concern for Jeffrey's well-being. Was he a willing participant in these schemes or another victim? That evening, I received a text message from Jeffrey that read simply, "Need to talk to you. Important, please." When I called immediately, there was no answer. I tried twice more that night without success. The next day, I met my friend Barbara for lunch and shared the situation. Barbara's son had married a manipulative woman years ago, and she'd watched helplessly as he was isolated from family and friends. "Be careful," Barbara warned. "When people like this don't get what they want, they can become dangerous. Not necessarily physically, but they'll do whatever it takes to protect their lifestyle and control, and they're very good at making their partners complicit in their schemes." That afternoon, I noticed something odd while browsing social media. Despite supposedly needing $155,000 for their business, Allison had posted pictures of a new luxury watch for Jeffrey captioned, "Just because gifts are the best, had blessed, had love my husband." The timestamp showed it was purchased 2 days after our meeting. Later that week, I received a surprise invitation to dinner at Jeffrey and Allison's home. The text came from Jeffrey's phone, but had Allison's distinctive writing style, overly formal with multiple exclamation points. "We insist you join us for dinner Friday. We have exciting news to share." When I arrived at their apartment building, I noticed Jeffrey's car was sporting new premium tires and custom rims that definitely weren't there during their visit to my home. Small details perhaps, but telling ones. Dinner was a tense affair. Allison was performatively cheerful, serving an elaborate meal on what appeared to be brand new china. Jeffrey drank heavily throughout dinner, starting with scotch before we even sat down and continuing with wine throughout the meal. He contributed little to the conversation, laughing too loudly at Allison's jokes and avoiding substantive topics. I couldn't help noticing several new purchases around their apartment. A large original painting that dominated one wall, new furniture in the living room, and Allison wearing diamond earrings I'd never seen before. Midway through dinner, Allison steered the conversation toward finances again. "We actually have great news," she announced, reaching for Jeffrey's hand. "We found an alternative investor for our wellness platform. Someone who really believes in us." She emphasized the last part while maintaining uncomfortable eye contact with me. "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely relieved. "Who's the investor?" "A private angel investor," Allison said vaguely. "They prefer to remain anonymous until the launch." Jeffrey shifted uncomfortably in his seat and took another large gulp of wine. As I drove home that evening, an uneasy feeling settled over me. Something about the dinner felt staged, as though they were trying to make me regret not investing, perhaps hoping I would offer money after all. The mysterious angel investor seemed conveniently timed, and Jeffrey's behavior had been concerning. My suspicions were confirmed the next morning when I received a call from my niece Lauren, who worked at the same company as one of Allison's friends. "Aunt Verna, I thought you should know Allison has been talking about taking out a loan against your house. Her friend mentioned it to my coworker, not realizing we were related. Apparently, Allison said she has some kind of plan to get you to sign papers." Lauren's call left me deeply shaken. I began researching Allison more thoroughly online and discovered several concerning reviews from former colleagues at previous jobs describing manipulative behavior and questionable ethics. One particularly troubling comment mentioned that Allison had been asked to leave a financial services firm due to irregularities in client accounts. The stress of the situation began affecting my health. I developed insomnia, my blood pressure increased, and I found myself jumping whenever the phone rang. I installed a security camera at my front door and became more cautious about my personal information. I even visited my lawyer to ensure my will and financial documents were secure and couldn't be easily manipulated. Despite my growing concerns, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. The doorbell rang early Saturday morning. When I checked the security camera, I was surprised to see Jeffrey and Allison on my porch. They hadn't called ahead, and after our dinner and the information from my niece, I was wary. Still, I couldn't turn away my own son. "Good morning," Allison chirped as I opened the door. She was holding a paper bag from an upscale coffee shop and wearing a broad smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We thought we'd surprise you with breakfast." Jeffrey stood slightly behind her, his expression difficult to read. He hadn't shaved, and dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. I invited them in, keeping my tone light despite my reservations. Allison bustled into my kitchen, unpacking pastries and setting out paper cups from the bag. "I brought you something special," she announced, pulling out a silver thermos. "I know you love good coffee, and this is a unique blend I discovered. It's imported from a small farm in Colombia, very exclusive." "That's thoughtful," I replied, watching as she unscrewed the thermos cap. "I could just make a fresh pot for all of us." "Oh, no," Allison insisted. "You need to try this. I had them prepare it specially for you." She poured the dark liquid into one of the paper cups. "It has hints of chocolate and berries. Very complex flavor profile." As she handed me the cup, I noticed a strange smell, something medicinal beneath the coffee aroma. When I commented on it, Allison quickly explained, "That's the special processing method they use. Very unique. Some people detect a slight herbal note." Jeffrey remained unusually quiet throughout this exchange, studying the pattern on my kitchen floor, as though it contained hidden messages. When I asked if he wanted coffee, he shook his head without looking up. The doorbell rang again, startling all of us. On the security camera monitor, I saw Diane, Allison's mother, standing on the porch. "Mom," Allison said sharply when I let Diane in. "What are you doing here?" Diane looked flustered. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by to say hello to Verna. I didn't realize you would be here too." The tension in the room was palpable. Allison's smile had frozen into a grimace while Jeffrey had moved to the far side of the kitchen, still avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Would you like some coffee, Diane?" I asked, stalling for time as my mind raced. Something was very wrong here. Allison brought a special blend she was just telling me about. "That would be lovely," Diane replied, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrents in the room. "I need to use the bathroom first," I said, picking up my cup. "I'll be right back." In the privacy of my bathroom, I stared at the coffee, the strange smell even more noticeable now. My instincts were screaming that something was dangerous about this situation. On impulse, I poured the coffee down the toilet, rinsed the cup, and filled it with water from the tap. When I returned to the kitchen, Allison was sitting rigidly at the table, while Diane chatted about a neighborhood garden tour. Jeffrey stood by the window, shoulders tense, occasionally checking his watch. "Diane, would you like some of this special coffee Allison brought?" I asked, reaching for the thermos. "I don't think—" Allison began, but I had already poured a cup for Diane. "Here," I said, handing Diane the cup with the coffee. I sat down with my cup of water, which looked dark enough, in the paper cup to pass for coffee. Cheers to family gatherings. Allison watched intently as I pretended to sip from my cup. "What do you think? Can you taste the special notes I mentioned?" "Very unique," I agreed vaguely. "Not like anything I've had before." Allison seemed to relax slightly, turning her attention to her phone while still glancing at me occasionally. Diane sipped her coffee, commenting on its unusual flavor but continuing to drink politely. About 15 minutes into this uncomfortable gathering, Diane suddenly put her hand to her head. "I feel strange," she murmured. "Very dizzy all of a sudden." Allison's head snapped up, her eyes darting between her mother and me with growing confusion and alarm. "Mom, are you okay?" Diane's speech began to slur. "Room spinning, don't feel right." Her cup slipped from her fingers, coffee spilling across the table as she slumped in her chair. "Mom," Allison cried out, genuine panic in her voice as she rushed to Diane's side. She turned accusingly to me. "What's happening? Why isn't it affecting you?" The implications of her question confirmed my worst fears. "We need to get her to the hospital," I said firmly, already reaching for my phone to call 911. Now, Jeffrey, who had been frozen in shock by the window, suddenly seemed to understand what was happening. The color drained from his face as he looked from his unconscious mother-in-law to his wife. "Allison," he whispered, "what did you do?" "Nothing," she snapped, but her eyes told a different story as they darted frantically between me and her mother. "There must be something wrong with her. She has health problems. It's not the coffee." The paramedics arrived within minutes. As they stabilized Diane and prepared to transport her, one asked what she might have ingested. Before Allison could speak, I handed him the thermos. "She drank this coffee. I believe it may have been drugged," I said clearly. "Please make sure the hospital tests for sedatives or other substances." Allison tried to interject, but Jeffrey finally found his voice. "She's right," he said, his voice breaking. "Test the coffee." We followed the ambulance to the hospital, a terrible silence filling my car. Jeffrey sat in the back seat, his face in his hands. Allison had insisted on riding with her mother in the ambulance, perhaps to distance herself from us, or to attempt damage control at the hospital. In the emergency waiting room, Jeffrey finally broke down. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he sobbed, looking years younger and terribly vulnerable. "I didn't know she would go this far. I swear I didn't know." "What was supposed to happen?" I asked quietly, though I already suspected the answer. "The coffee. It had pills crushed in it. Sleeping pills and something else. You were supposed to get drowsy, confused, suggestible." His voice dropped to a whisper. "There were papers in her purse for you to sign." "What kind of papers, Jeffrey?" "Power of attorney and authorization to refinance your house." He couldn't look at me as he spoke. "We're in so much debt, Mom. Over $300,000. Credit cards, loans. Allison keeps spending, and when I try to talk to her about it, she says I don't support her or I don't love her enough." The betrayal cut deep, but seeing my son's genuine remorse, I knew he had been as much a victim of Allison's manipulation as I nearly was. "Has she done this before?" I asked gently. He nodded miserably. "To her Uncle Harold. She said he wanted to help us but was being stubborn about the paperwork. She put something in his tea, got him to sign over some investments. He never knew. She said it was victimless, that he was going to help anyway. And this just made it easier." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I knew it was wrong, but by then we were so deep in debt and she convinced me it was our only option. As Jeffrey continued his confession, the full extent of Allison's financial and emotional manipulation became clear. What had started as occasional overspending had escalated over years into a pattern of deception that had ensnared my son completely. He had become both accomplice and victim, too afraid and ashamed to ask for help until it was almost too late. Our conversation was interrupted when Allison returned to the waiting room. Her expression changed from worry to fury when she saw us talking. "What have you been saying?" she demanded of Jeffrey, her voice low but intense. Before he could answer, a doctor approached us. "Mrs. Hamilton," he addressed Allison, "your mother is stable now. We've pumped her stomach and are running toxicology screens. She was very fortunate this was caught quickly. The preliminary tests show benzodiazepines and what appears to be a strong sedative in her system. Can you think of how she might have ingested these substances?" Allison's face went blank. "I have no idea. She takes a lot of supplements. Maybe she mixed up her pills. The substances were found in the coffee we tested. The doctor continued. The police have been notified as this appears to be a potential poisoning case. At the mention of police, Allison's demeanor changed completely. This is ridiculous, she hissed. It must have been a mistake at the coffee shop. The coffee was in your thermos, Allison, I said quietly. The one you prepared specially for me. She turned on me, mask finally dropping completely. You switched the cups. You were supposed to drink it. Not my mother. The moment the words left her mouth, she seemed to realize what she'd admitted. Jeffrey stood up, physically putting himself between us. It's over, Allison, he said, his voice steadier than I'd heard it in years. I can't do this anymore. We're going to tell the police everything. You idiot, she spat at him. They'll arrest you too. You knew about this. You'll go to jail right along with me. I don't care anymore, Jeffrey replied, an odd calm settling over him. At least I'll be free of the lies. Diane regained consciousness as this confrontation unfolded in the waiting room. When she learned what had happened, that she had accidentally ingested drugs meant for me, she broke down in tears. I always knew something wasn't right with her, she confessed to me later. Even as a child, Allison would do anything to get what she wanted. But I never thought she would go this far. I've enabled her all these years, making excuses covering for her behavior. I'm so sorry, Verna. Hospital security was called when Allison became increasingly hostile, threatening both Jeffrey and me. As they escorted her from the building, she continued to hurl accusations and threats. The look of pure hatred on her face as she was led away will stay with me forever. Not because it frightened me, but because I finally saw the true person behind the charming facade she'd maintained for so long. As we waited for the police to take our statements, Jeffrey looked utterly defeated. I've lost everything, he whispered. I took his hand in mine. Not everything, I told him. You found your way back to the truth, and to me. That's a start. The police investigation moved with surprising speed. When detectives searched Jeffrey and Allison's apartment, they discovered a troubling collection of evidence, a drawer full of prescription medications, many in other people's names, financial documents showing extensive debt, and most damning, a journal where Allison had outlined her plan to obtain my money, including notes on drug dosages and their effects. They also found a folder labeled Previous Investments, containing documentation related to Harold's case and two other elderly relatives who had gifted Allison large sums of money under suspicious circumstances. One of these individuals had died the previous year, taking any potential testimony to the grave. I hired an attorney for Jeffrey, a compassionate but straightforward woman named Marlene, who specialized in cases where one spouse was coerced into criminal activity by another. Jeffrey cooperated fully with the investigation, providing details about each of Allison's schemes and his own reluctant participation in them. Your son is in a difficult position legally, Marlene explained to me after their first meeting. He knew about these activities and participated to some degree, which makes him culpable. However, there's strong evidence of emotional manipulation and coercion. His complete cooperation and genuine remorse will work in his favor. The decision to testify against Allison was agonizing but necessary. Jeffrey would have to publicly admit his role in her schemes, exposing himself to legal consequences and public shame. But as he told me the night before his first court appearance, I need to face this. I can't hide from what I've done anymore. Allison was charged with attempted drugging, fraud, elder abuse, and several financial crimes. When the case became public, 3 more victims came forward with similar stories of being manipulated into giving her money or signing over assets while under the influence of substances. Throughout this period, my health suffered. The stress triggered migraines and exacerbated my arthritis. Some nights I would wake in a panic, reliving the moment when I realized what Allison had intended to do. My doctor prescribed anti-anxiety medication, which I took reluctantly, aware of the irony given recent events. My friends rallied around me, taking turns driving me to court appearances and ensuring I wasn't alone on difficult days. Barbara, who had warned me about Allison, organized a rotation of friends to check on me regularly. "You've always been there for all of us," she reminded me. "Now it's our turn." The media attention was another unexpected strain. A local news station ran a segment on elder financial abuse, featuring our case, and suddenly neighbors and distant acquaintances were calling to express sympathy or more often curiosity. I stopped answering my phone unless I recognized the number and limited my social media activity. Diane and I formed an unlikely alliance during this period. Both of us had been manipulated by Allison, albeit in different ways. We would sometimes meet for coffee, which became something of a dark joke between us, and share our experiences. Diane carried tremendous guilt for what she saw as her failure in raising Allison. "I always gave in," she confessed during one of our talks. "It was easier than dealing with her tantrums and manipulation. I thought I was showing love, but I was just teaching her that she could get whatever she wanted by being persistent enough or underhanded enough." Jeffrey, released on bail and having filed for divorce, moved temporarily into my spare bedroom. Those first weeks were awkward and tense. We were both processing betrayal, mine at his hands and his at Allison's. But gradually, as we established a routine of shared meals and quiet evenings, we began to rebuild our relationship. One night he broke down completely. "How can you even look at me?" he asked through tears. "I almost let her drug you. I was going to let her take your money, your house, everything you've worked for." "You were a victim too," I told him, though I acknowledged that his actions had deeply hurt me. "The important thing is that you stopped it before it was too late, and now you're taking responsibility." A psychological evaluation ordered by the court diagnosed Allison with narcissistic personality disorder and pathological lying. The psychiatrist testified that while she understood the wrongfulness of her actions, she lacked empathy for her victims and showed no genuine remorse, only regret at being caught. In a particularly difficult court session, Jeffrey testified about how Allison had systematically isolated him from friends and family, created financial crises that only her solutions could fix, and gradually eroded his self-esteem until he felt dependent on her guidance in all things. She would tell me that everyone was trying to take advantage of me, that only she really cared about my well-being. He explained to the court. "Eventually, I believed that even my own mother was somehow against me." The sentencing hearing brought final closure to this chapter of our lives. Allison, elegantly dressed and composed, maintained her innocence despite the mountain of evidence. She portrayed herself as a misunderstood entrepreneur whose ambitions had been misinterpreted as criminal intent. When given the opportunity to address the court, she spoke at length about her difficult childhood and the challenges of being a woman in business, never once acknowledging the harm she had caused. By contrast, Jeffrey's statement was brief and direct. "I failed to protect my mother from someone I brought into her life. I failed to stand up for what I knew was right because I was afraid of losing my wife's approval. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for that failure." When the judge sentenced Allison to 12 years in prison for the combined charges, her composure finally broke. She shouted accusations at Jeffrey and me as she was led away, claiming we had conspired against her and promising that this isn't over. Despite the outburst, I felt only sadness watching her go. Sadness for the bright, capable person she could have been had she channeled her intelligence into legitimate pursuits. As for Jeffrey, he received a suspended sentence with 5 years of probation, community service, and mandatory therapy. The judge noted his cooperation, evident remorse, and status as both participant and victim in the schemes. "It appears you have already begun the work of rehabilitation," the judge told him. "Continue that path." As we left the courthouse that final day, reporters shouted questions about our feelings toward Allison and the sentence. Jeffrey squeezed my hand and whispered, "We don't owe them our pain." We walked silently to the car, ready to begin the long process of healing away from public scrutiny. It's been a full year since the coffee incident that changed everything. Sometimes it feels like a decade. Other times the memory is so fresh it could have been yesterday. The journey to healing has been neither quick nor easy, but looking back I can see how far we've come. Jeffrey has transformed in ways I wouldn't have thought possible. The initial months were excruciating for him as he grappled with the dual trauma of Allison's betrayal and his own moral failure. Nightmares plagued him. Some mornings I would find him at the kitchen table at dawn, eyes red from sleeplessness, a cold cup of coffee untouched before him. Therapy became his lifeline. Initially mandated by the court, he soon recognized its value and increased his sessions voluntarily. His therapist specialized in relationships with narcissistic partners and helped him understand the gradual, insidious nature of Allison's control. It's like the story of boiling a frog, he explained to me after one session. If you put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out immediately. But if you put it in cool water and slowly heat it, the frog doesn't notice until it's too late. That's what happened to me. Each compromise seemed small at the time, but they added up to something monstrous. Financial recovery has been challenging but steady. Jeffrey's marketing career was effectively over once the case became public. No company wanted to risk association with the scandal. Instead, he found work at a small warehouse starting at minimum wage and working his way up to shift supervisor. The pay is modest, but he takes pride in earning honest money. With the help of a financial counselor, we established a strict repayment plan for his legitimate debts. I contributed by paying for his living expenses while he lived with me, but made it clear that I wouldn't directly pay off debts accumulated during his marriage. This wasn't punishment, but a necessary part of his taking responsibility for his choices. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. Allison contested it from prison, initially demanding alimony and a share of assets that didn't exist. Her court-appointed attorney eventually convinced her to accept the inevitable. Jeffrey emerged with nothing but freedom from the relationship. No assets, considerable debt, but a clean break. My own healing process has had its ups and downs. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, especially when it's been violated by someone you love. There were moments during Jeffrey's initial confessions when I wondered if I would ever be able to fully trust him again. Could I believe anything he told me, or would I always be questioning, always looking for signs of deception? The breakthrough came unexpectedly. One evening, about 4 months after the incident, Jeffrey and I were sorting through old family photos. We came across a picture from his 10th birthday, Richard standing proudly beside Jeffrey and his new bicycle, both of them beaming at the camera. Jeffrey stared at the photo for a long time, then said quietly, "Dad would be so ashamed of me." "No," I corrected him gently. "Disappointed in your choices, yes, but your father always believed in second chances, in the possibility of redemption. He would be proud of how you're rebuilding your life." Jeffrey looked up, eyes glistening. "I don't deserve this kindness from you." "It's not about deserving," I told him. "It's about choosing to move forward with love instead of bitterness. That's what family should be." Something shifted between us that night. We began to speak more openly, not just about the trauma we'd shared, but about everyday things, books, news, memories. Laughter, which had been absent from our home for so long, gradually returned. Setting appropriate boundaries has been crucial to rebuilding our relationship. I made it clear that while I loved him unconditionally, my trust would need to be earned back through consistent honesty and responsible behavior. For his part, Jeffrey has respected these boundaries, sometimes going to extraordinary lengths to demonstrate his reliability in small matters. 6 months ago, Jeffrey moved into his own apartment. Nothing fancy, just a simple one-bedroom in a safe neighborhood. It was an important step in his journey toward independence. I helped him furnish it with a mix of second-hand items and a few quality pieces that would last. The day he moved in, he insisted on cooking dinner for me in his new kitchen, a simple pasta dish, but made with such care and pride that it tasted better than any restaurant meal. Diane has become an unexpected friend in this journey. We meet regularly for lunch, sometimes joined by Jeffrey. She's found her voice after decades of walking on eggshells around Allison. Recently, she's become involved with a support group for parents of incarcerated adult children, finding purpose in helping others navigate the complex emotions of loving someone who has caused serious harm. Jeffrey has started a small, legitimate business on the side, using his marketing skills to help local businesses improve their online presence. He approaches it with careful planning and absolute transparency. I've seen every business plan, every contract, every financial statement. The business grows slowly but steadily, built on a foundation of integrity rather than grand promises. My involvement is limited to occasional advice when asked. We both recognize that too much financial entanglement would be unhealthy given our history. Instead, he consults with a small business mentor through a community program, making decisions independently but wisely. Through a strange twist of fate, I found myself becoming something of an advocate for awareness of elder financial abuse. I've spoken at two senior centers about recognizing warning signs and protecting oneself from manipulation by family members or caregivers. The first time was terrifying, standing before a room of strangers, sharing such a personal and painful story. But the responses afterward, people quietly sharing their own experiences or thanking me for helping them recognize red flags in their own relationships, made the discomfort worthwhile. In these presentations, I always emphasize that financial abuse often comes from those closest to us, wrapped in love and seemingly good intentions. I teach others to watch for isolation tactics, unexplained urgency requests, for secrecy and emotional manipulation, all strategies Allison employed masterfully. Forgiveness has been a complex and ongoing process. I've come to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the harm never occurred. It means choosing not to let bitterness consume me, not to let Allison's actions destroy my relationship with my son or my capacity for joy. Jeffrey struggles more with forgiving himself than I do with forgiving him. How could I have been so blind? He often asks. How did I not see what she really was? Love makes us vulnerable, I tell him, and skilled manipulators know exactly how to use that vulnerability against us. Gradually, he's learning to separate the shame of his actions from his worth as a person, to acknowledge his mistakes without being defined by them. In this journey, he's become more compassionate not only toward himself, but toward others who have been deceived or manipulated. What surprised me most was discovering my own strength through this ordeal. At 63, I had thought my greatest challenges were behind me. I had survived losing Richard, built a comfortable retirement, and thought I understood the world and my place in it. This experience shook that confidence, but ultimately reinforced it. My instincts quite literally saved me from harm. My capacity for resilience, for adaptation, for forgiveness, all proved greater than I had known. Perhaps the most profound lesson has been about the true nature of family. It isn't defined by blind loyalty or financial support, but by honesty, accountability, and the courage to hold one another to a higher standard out of love. Jeffrey and I have built something new from the ashes of betrayal, a relationship based on mutual respect and earned trust rather than obligation. 6 months ago, Jeffrey met a woman named Sarah through his community service work. Their relationship has developed slowly, deliberately. When he finally introduced us, I was struck by the difference in their dynamic compared to his relationship with Allison. They treat each other as equals. They disagree openly but respectfully. Most importantly, Jeffrey remains his own person, with her maintaining his friendships, hobbies, and relationship with me. She knows everything, he told me after their 5th date. About Allison, the court case, all of it. I promised myself I would never again build a relationship on secrets. Last week, my security camera alerted me to someone at the front door. It was Jeffrey holding a small gift bag. Inside was a delicate porcelain teacup. I thought maybe we could start a new tradition, he said somewhat shyly. Sunday afternoon tea, no coffee ever again. We laughed together, the kind of laughter that acknowledges pain but chooses joy instead. And in that moment, I knew, with certainty, that we would be okay. Life will never return to what it was before Allison. How could it? But in many ways, we've built something stronger, more authentic, and more precious than what existed before. We've learned to trust our instincts, to recognize red flags, to value truth over comfort. We've discovered that healing doesn't mean erasing scars, but learning to carry them with grace. When I think back to that morning and the coffee that smelled wrong, I'm reminded of how important it is to listen to that quiet voice of intuition. Sometimes our subconscious recognizes danger before our conscious mind can name it. I'm grateful every day that I trusted that feeling. Have you ever experienced a moment where your instinct saved you from something harmful? Or perhaps you ignored that inner warning and wished you hadn't? Share your story in the comments below. And if this account of betrayal and healing resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more real life experiences. Remember to share this with someone who might need a reminder to trust their gut feelings. It might just save them from their own cup of special coffee. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always have the courage to trust yourself when something doesn't feel right.